Hello, welcome back to a new episode of For the Love of Weather. This is the podcast where we explore the Earth's atmosphere and how we are all connected through the weather and climate. We are your hosts, Gemma and Aisling. We are both meteorologists and weather presenters and have been working in weather now for over 15 years. If you are new to the podcast, we are so happy to have you here with us today. And if you are coming back to us, it's amazing to know we have your company again. And as always, we hope that you leave this episode loving the weather just that little bit more and learn a little something about how the weather and climate can impact our daily lives.
So our guest today is Sarah Aubrey, aka on Instagram, Electrify This. She has a down-to-earth, no-nonsense, easy to follow way of decarbonising your home, and also has a lovely way of explaining that although we want to get to net zero, you might make some carbon, but you always make better decisions by decarbonisation. She's also a voiceover artist, an actor. Her voice has been in Happy Feet. She shared a microphone with Robin Williams, and she's also the voice behind the launch promo for I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here in the UK, which I'm sure many of us know. Sarah, what are you doing giving us your time tonight? Thanks so much.
Why am I here? No, well, I'm not a meteorologist, so if you wanted Dr. Sarah Aubrey, you've got the wrong person. But yes, I am here with pleasure, and always very happy to talk about climate change and the electrification of our homes.
I think that's the thing. So I'll just tell you the backstory to how I actually found you. I was on my Instagram feed, and this little story of yours came up, and it was the 6th of February, just this year. And you just said, politicians are standing outside Parliament rallying against renewables. And then you just stopped and smiled and said, this is great news. It means that we're getting under people's skin and they're bothered by this.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was
They're
from
worried.
there I just found all the rest of your stuff. And it's about decarbonizing your house, but it's with this really great view that we have. You're not trying to say that you're not going to create carbon by decarbonizing, but there's loads of ways to reduce your carbon and just some really practical things that I just never knew. And I love it. It's so open, it's so honest, and you absolutely need to check out the Instagram feed. And I can't actually wait to see what's going to come. But I think it's just, I feel like I'm having a chat with you every time you come across
You
it.
are.
So
I most of the time I'm just walking my dog and I just think of something to say and I'm just kind of meandering along. So you really are coming with me in my daily life. It's not a lie. I'm very much being myself.
well,
Um,
thank you for taking us along with you. But I'm loving it. And I can't wait to see what you do. They're the most incredible posts. Some of them are like, I won't even say overly, like, you never rant about anything. You're just like, this is the thing. And
I
that's
try
the
not
way
to
it
rant,
is.
despite
Yeah.
the fact that I feel like
Great.
ranting quite often with the world and what's happening. Yeah, I don't. I mean, I try to be a bit philosophical, and I find actually just laughing at the stuff is actually a much healthier mental health way to be because I spent quite a bit of time on X, like looking at following a lot of climate scientists and people who talk about climate, and I just was feeling quite overwhelmed and terrified, and I just went, what can I do? What can I do? Obviously I've done things personally in my life to decarbonize the home, and I've done everything I pretty much can. But what can I do in terms of fixing things, like providing solutions, right? I just was like, everything's so negative, 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 we're all doomed. And I thought, well, I can't change that. So how about I try and enact a little bit of control and help people feel like they can do something, even small things. So yeah, I think it was about finding solutions rather than ranting about. And I feel like you push people away when you rant about things anyway. And to me, whenever I see that fossil fuel stuff, so those politicians rallying outside Parliament, for example, or recently I've seen a massive, massive push for big billboards across the highway going between Newcastle and Sydney for gas. Gas is our future and is our transition fuel, and we need it. And I'm like, oh dear, they know people are getting off gas, aren't they? Like that's how I look at it. I see because I have an advertising background. Obviously, I've done a lot of ads in my time. You do advertising because you need more sales, right? You're concerned about a loss of sales. So I'm like, oh. And I've seen loads of ads for petrol stations. I've never seen ads for petrol stations before. Like there's been heaps of them on in Australia. I'm like, what is going on? They're worried about electric cars. That's what's going on. So I like to look a couple of steps ahead about or behind the reasoning behind what they're doing. And I feel like that's a much healthier way to kind of look at stuff. But also I feel like this year and last year in particular is the first time ever I have heard the narrative of we need to stop opening new coal and gas, issuing licenses. We need to stop doing what we are right now. We need to shift to renewables. Sure, we've got fossil fuels now, but we need to stop creating new projects. And I feel like that narrative has never really seeped into the public consciousness before. And that is very exciting.
It is. And oh gosh, there's so much of what you say there. So, like, science communication can be quite difficult. And actually, historically, as a scientist, even if you go back to the beginning of myself and Gemma's career, you know, it's almost like you just produce the conclusion and you're not supposed to have an actual opinion or feel a little bit emotional over something. And that has changed a lot. And actually, communicating science is so important now because if you don't, well, then you're just going to lose everyone. And when you have a big message like this one, you have to be a great communicator at science, and and you need lots of different people to do that. And all scientists are having to rethink anything. And also, not everybody likes being put out there. So, with
Mm.
that, tell us a little bit about just when you started the Instagram account and like you did put yourself out there unknowingly and a little bit about all of the wonderful trolls you've picked up as well, which is
Oh, look,
remarkable.
I mean, um, I am not the kind of person. I mean, yes, I'm an actor and a voice actor, but the fact that I'm more a voice actor, like 99% of what I do is voice acting, is testament to the fact that, I mean, I went to the NIDA, which is the equivalent of RADA, right? It's our national school. And I did acting for a few years, and I realized very quickly after being followed around at the shops when I was on home and away for a couple of months to go, no, I don't really like this. So anyway, I've spent 25 years in a very small, dark place. My voice is very famous in Australia, but people have no idea who I am. And even my personal accounts don't have my profile picture. So I've been very low key, shall we say. And there was a 40-degree day in Sydney, and I went, this is really annoying me. I'm just going to do something, right? I'm just going to start an Instagram account. And so I started on the 9th of December. And do you know what? I was so useless. Like normally I just do posts on Instagram anyway. I'd never done reels. And I actually started posting reels accidentally because you know how it's the default. And I guess the video was less than 90 seconds. So then they started to go into reels. I mean, I was even in landscape initially, not portrait. Like this is how useless I was. So anyway, started to post to reels. And I had about 60 followers around Christmas. And on Christmas Day, I was scrolling through, I was at my mum's, and I was scrolling through my Instagram and this new account, 2 weeks old, and I was about 15 comments there from fossil fuel trolls. And I was like, fine. I thought I'm going to make a post about that. So I made an 18-second post, and all I said was something like, oh, this account's been going, what, 2, 3 weeks? It was actually 2 weeks. And already the fossil fuel trolls have found it. Isn't that interesting and revealing? 18 seconds, right? One hashtag, electrification. Well, did I bloody ever? Anyway, that post was viewed, honestly, it was like that day it was 500 views. And I was like, it's a bit weird. 1,000 views the next day. I had 1,000 followers within 4 days. And it was like, then it was 5,000 followers within like 2 weeks. And I was like, what is going on? And it was like, and it was being pushed out obviously to sort of fossil fuel trolls because they were smashing me, like smashing the account. But what they've actually done, and I have to thank them for this. And I was like, I'm not deleting anything. I'm just going to leave it there to sit there because the algorithm is probably just going to go, oh, people are engaging with this post. It must be great. And what happened is it got put into recommended reels. Maybe it was a quiet day on Christmas Day on Instagram. I don't know. But what happened with that was that then it just got pushed out and pushed out. And that's how it's just grown so quickly. So it's amazing. But what they've actually done is they've made it findable for people who are genuinely interested in this stuff. So it's not trolls who are following me. There might be a few and then they've given up. But man, it's really coordinated as well. I've seen this kind of goes in waves. And I don't know whether it's you've paid for 1 week at a troll farm or whether it's AI but it's like the same post, but just ever so slightly different. So to me, I kind of take a step back and go, oh, isn't that interesting? That even that's something worth kind of analyzing. So it takes a bit of, I would say to anyone putting themselves out there, I mean, I'm glad that I'm an emotionally intelligent person and I've been to therapy and I'm in a good place in my life kind of thing. But I think the point was they wanted to kill the account before it even got started. They saw it and went, right, we need to smash this person, bullying, attacking my looks, my intelligence, dismissing me, putting down everything I say, you stupid, you don't know what you're talking about, all this stuff. Like, and if you were the kind of person who was just like, oh, I'm just going to start an Instagram account, you'd be freaked out and you'd go, oh, this is too hard. And that's what they wanted. And instead, I'm a Leo and I'm like, right, this is it. You're going to do that to me? Oh, man, it's on. This is annoying you. I can tell it's annoying them. And I'm like, right, I'm just going to get out the popcorn and just do video after video after video that gets under their skin. So I don't want to focus too on in my account. I don't like to focus too much on them, but I do like to sprinkle the odd trail bait one. Like I stood in front of like a petrol Bowser and I went, do you think all the people trolling me, do you think that this appears here like fairy dust? Do you think what comes out of the tailpipe of cars like has no effect on the environment and no effect on human health, which they never talk about the human health part, I will point out. Anyway, and then of course, then they're like, so, and then that boosts the account. I'm like sucked in.
This is your initial good intentions and they've just went over. And if that's motivation as well, it's just wonderful. But also it is a brilliant account. So tell us a little bit about how you started decarbon. So what's decarbonizing? Tell us how you started. So tell us a little bit about decarbonisation.
Yes. So really it's removing gas from your house, the fossil fuel part of the power in your house that you're in control of. Obviously the grid, again, the responsibility of climate change is on the fossil fuel companies and the energy companies and the car companies. The things that we need to buy, they need to decarbonize those things. That's not on us. But you are in control of your own home, right? So you can, and obviously gas in the UK is a massive thing. And in Australia, it used to be cheap, right? And they encouraged everyone to go and put gas stoves in their homes, and gas hot water is instantaneous gas is very popular. So probably the initial motivation was our house was freezing cold in winter, like so cold. And I know that you say it's cold over there, but I've never met more English people that complain about how cold it is until they come and live here in our terrible houses that have no double glazing, no central heating, and we all just pretend it doesn't get cold in Sydney. And it does. So I just thought, look, I'll get off gas. So that's getting rid of that and improve the insulation in the house. So we got rid of our gas stove. We put in an induction stove. We replaced the hot water with a heat pump. And we had a really unflued, disgusting, making us sleepy and probably amazing it didn't kill us in winter, unflued gas heater in the lounge room. You know, one of those radiant ones. I'm amazed we didn't die. Probably because there were so many gaps and cracks in my home, we didn't die. So yeah, got rid of all those things. Then you can do the draft proofing because you can't do that if there's gas inside the house. Topped up our roof insulation, put in a ceiling fan in our bedroom. Oh my God. Do you know what? Out of all the things we did, I think that's actually my favorite thing that we did because it's silent and it's so nice. And apparently when you have a fan on you, it can, even though it doesn't actually change the temperature in the room really, having that feeling of something blowing against your skin can actually reduce your core body temperature by a couple of degrees, right? Here am I talking to scientists about things.
No, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. We may know a lot about one thing. We don't know a lot about that. I didn't know that. And actually I have had a fan blow on me before, but I guess if it's above your head, and I've always ended up with a cold, but if it's above your head, it's a different thing. It's not blowing into your face, it's on your skin.
It's just blowing on you. It's just the feeling of it on your skin, whether it be a floor fan or a ceiling fan. And yeah, we put in underfloor insulation. So because we've got floorboards, that actually was a massive difference because we had this, and when they were under the house, staple it because they staple it between the joists. And it's like about what do you call that? Like 10, 15 centimeters thick, the insulation. And it comes in rolls and they just roll it out and they staple it between the joists. And they were like, oh yeah, we could see straight up into your house. All as we were going around because there were so many gaps in the floorboards. So that made a massive difference. And then we actually did replace the glass in our, sash windows. And it's actually a UK company that have an office here and they work on heritage listed stuff in the UK. And they take the window off, they sort of give it a nice sand down, recondition it. And then they replace the old 100-year-old single glaze glass with like a double laminate. And because the window's heavier, they change the weights and add weight to those and And now our windows go shh instead of. So yeah, it's great.
That's fantastic. And so it's all just self-taught stuff. So a little bit of motivation of just thinking like, I want to do something here. And actually, this is a question we raise all the time with everyone, which is sometimes I feel a little bit overwhelmed by like the amount of stuff that I know and I understand like the weather patterns, and I actually feel a little bit overwhelmed by it. And our question is always like, what can you do? And it's part of the reason why we keep this podcast going. It's like it's part of our solution. We just want to, you never know what one thing some other person might hear and spark a conversation. And so, so what can you do is it's a very overwhelming feeling when you know a lot. So I just love what you're doing. I really do. And it is
I,
one of the
I,
biggest things. What can I do? What can I
I,
do?
th I think the knowledge you have is probably quite extraordinary. And yes, you must. I mean, if I probably knew as much as you do about the climate, I'd probably feel rather overwhelmed because I would understand it more. I do think people want solutions. So and the problem with the weather is you can't really change that at this point, can you? Like we can only do what we can do, and we can only pressure the governments and the people that we were and use our votes. I mean, in Australia, we have compulsory voting. The UK doesn't. So I'm like, how crazy. Um, but using your vote matters, and it's voting for people based on their policies, and it's voting out. Like we had a previous 9 years of a conservative government. They did everything they could to stop renewables, the shift to renewables, and stop the shift to electric cars. It was, and now since they've been out, we've had the new Labor government in for over just I think a year and a half, 18 months, and the jump in sales from electric cars has jumped from 2% to 8%. It still doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a big jump in terms of uptake, right? But we've seen a lot of pushback from astroturfing going on with groups where, like, for example, off the coast of Newcastle, the Labor government have sort of designated that area as a potential wind farm zone. And there's a particular group up there in Port Stephens, and it's been definitely co-opted by all sorts of crazies. Like I've looked through their group and I find that interesting. There's definitely people from overseas, and it makes them look so much bigger than they are. And they had a big rally up in Port Stephens, and the people who spoke at it were all right-wing politicians, like the Conservative right wing. They paid for a billboard, an AI-generated billboard of a dead whale on a beach, and about 5 meters behind offshore was these giant wind turbines, like completely ridiculous billboard, $30,000 billboard. We don't have truth in political advertising here, and there was no authorization on it. So I sent that picture to Comms Declare, which is this great company here that keeps track of all this sort of stuff, and also to an independent federal politician. And she was about to literally relaunch her truth in political advertising push. And it got pushed out, and the press covered it. And they backed down. It stayed up, but then they went, well, we just went with the information that we had at the time, and and then suddenly the whole wind turbines kill whales thing just disappeared. So you can have an effect if you just turn into a bit of a nana, and you just go, right, who can I send something to? And I don't have any connections with these people, but it was just good timing, and it's just good for them to see it because they might put it on their socials, and they might just go, that needs to be looked into. So it's definitely worth. Just kind of if something annoys you, like a pothole with the council, if you report it, it will get fixed. If you just whinge about it on Facebook, nothing will happen.
I feel like I need to listen to this podcast a few times every morning. I'm like, right, I'm going to go do something today. And actually, it is one of the things that, so over the years, we've kind of come up with like, what can you do? Has always been the question, like, what can I do? And actually, you're right. It needs to come from everywhere. So like for me, it needs to start locally as well. What am I doing locally? What am I planting? Like my little garden, what am I teaching about that? And if everyone's doing that, then everyone's looking after themselves. But you need it to come from everywhere. You need to write to your politician. You need to vote people in who are gonna make a change. You're right, there is lots of things you can do. You won't do it
The
alone.
difference
You can do
is
it
that
together.
eventually it will become like whack-a-mole, right?
Mm.
It will become like, because even with someone like Just Stop Oil or any of those groups in the UK and overseas, then it might annoy people, but it keeps the subject in the in the public sphere. This is how change happens. One of my posts, I said that, like I was thinking about how history will look back on this time. How will we be teaching this moment in history where we are at a tipping point? This is a really important moment. And I compared it to the suffragettes. Do you imagine that the suffragettes, If they had wanted to actually get the right to vote, if they had just said please and thank you and can we have the vote, please, we'd still be waiting to get the vote. They had to throw themselves in front of horses and get arrested and make noise. And then they made it happen. And that is happening now. And it's starting. And because of social media, it must just be driving them nuts. And as I said, it's like a whack-a-mole. You can only do so much. And the one thing I think about that they just don't consider enough, the one thing they cannot change is that people have children and they care about their kids' future. They cannot change that. And in front of our very eyes now, we're seeing more extreme weather more often, and we're seeing it change. Sydney weather has changed 100%. It's way more humid than it used to be. It's raining. We had 3 years of rain, which is just unheard of. And now we've got a year of drought. And it's like there's no in between anymore of those extremes. And we just had massive storms in Victoria where 500,000 people lost power. And we need to decentralize our grids so that we don't have this one big power station. And if that goes out, all these people are left without power. And you know, we kind of need to democratize. And that's why they don't like electric cars as well, because you're democratizing power. You're able to take it away from that classic idea of the pump where you have to pay their price and what they say, and you can charge your car at home or somewhere else, wherever you want to. They don't like that. That's why they're like, yeah, hydrogen, great, because it's the same model. You can't charge your car anywhere else except where they decide. And of course, you can't make hydrogen without fossil fuels at this point. As soon as people realize how good it is, they're like, no, I like being able to charge at home or charge on my street and not have to go to a petrol bowser. So it's that kind of decentralization and democratization of our power that I think is really challenging that big model of like big person gives little person things and we decide everything. Tony Sieber, who's this brilliant Stanford lecturer, he says he's kind of looked at all the countries around the world and kind of analyzed what we need. And he said, all we need is wind, solar, and batteries. And the mix per country and per place will be different. So, for example, in Australia, we'll have so much more solar because we have so much more sun. You know, we have 60+% uptake of rooftop solar in Australia, and you've got something like 4% in the UK. But you have so much more wind than us. But the key is batteries.
There's obviously a huge wave of change over in Australia at the moment.
There is. There's a
Yeah.
massive push by this government to have 82% renewables in our grid by 2030. So yeah, they're going for it. But a lot of pushback with transmission lines over farming land and putting wind turbines up. They're trying to stop it, trying to stop the big projects happening. That's the problem. So they've really got to get their skates on.
Have you enjoyed everything you've been learning?
Yeah, of course. This is actually a public service because my family and friends are so like, Sarah, shut up. Please shut up. So really, you're doing the world a favor, and anyone watching the Instagram is also doing a favor because I just love it. I just genuinely am fascinated and curious and interested in this stuff. But also I can, because I mean, I loved studying history at school and university, right? And the thing that I loved about ancient history when I studied it was studying the causes and effects of things. And I feel like it teaches you, even though I didn't understand that it had a name, which is, I guess, critical thinking, I like to look at that stuff and kind of figure out how it will benefit everyone. And honestly, the results I've had in my house are so shockingly amazing. I just want every house to have this. I want every single house to be insulated properly and to be electrified. So we had ducted air conditioning in this house, 15-year-old ducted air. And then remember, we had a gas bill on top of this, which was the hot water cooking and the one heater. We were using over winter 42 kilowatt hours a day. So, you know, when you look at your bill and it says one person, well, I don't know if you do it over there, but on your bill in Australia, it's like one person uses 8 kilowatt hours a day and 2 people use 16 and 3 people use, I think the average is about 20 something kilowatts for 5 people. So we were using more than double what 5 people would use in a house. It's madness, right? And ducted air is shocking. Don't ever install it. When we got rid of that, we put the wall splits in, we electrified the house. You would think we would be adding to our electricity bill, right? Last winter, we used 12 kilowatt hours a day in winter. So we're using from the grid, right? Obviously, we're using a little bit more than a little bit of that, but we've only got a very small solar array. probably about 6-7 kilowatts of that is then added for the solar. But at about 20, we were probably using half. But because we've got solar, we're actually buying only a quarter of the energy from the grid that we used to. I'm mad. So my bill last month was $45 for the month for electricity. I have no gas bill.
Was there any subsidies that you get for making the changes that you have to your house? Like, because you've obviously had to invest quite a lot of money into making those changes that you've done and making those. So do you get
Yes.
any money for doing that?
You get a small amount of money. So when you do a heat pump, for example, if you're replacing the old, the old kind of electric tank, the resistive tank, if you get rid of one of those, you get $1,000. And if you're replacing, this is all state based, so it varies from state to state. And then if you get rid of instantaneous gas, you get a $500. So it's not a huge sum, but it's something. It's better than nothing. And you do get what we call STCs, which are also a little bit of money off your solar as well, which is good. I think there's stuff phasing that down potentially, but yes, there is something there. And the frustration that I have is that I'm very aware of my privilege, right? I'm someone who had the money to do this. And I'm very, we had money for an electric car saved up. And instead I thought, well, rather than spending on a car, because my driving is so much less now, since COVID, I work from home. Why don't I spend that money on the house? So I had the money. Not everyone has the money. And I'm like, I'm the person who could afford to pay a high energy bill. And yet I get the low energy bills. It's like a famous person being given a free car to drive around in. It's just unfair. So what we need to do is all the people who, housing commission, and we need, renters and people in apartments. And it's just really unfair. Like every single house needs this. And I'm hoping that if someone like me who can afford to do it, does it, then maybe there'll be money left over for people who can't afford it.
Yeah, it's a really, gosh, that is such a complicated
But
irony.
but ultimately, you end up saving money, right? It's like if you buy an electric car and everyone's driving around electric cars. Yes, that's good for the environment, but the other longer term benefit is that air quality improves, which saves governments billions of dollars in health costs because there's so many complications like strokes and heart attacks and all sorts of problems with poor air quality. So it's like if you invest now in that, you'll save so much more money in the long term. And I think insulating homes, doing all that stuff will actually do that. It will save governments so much more money down the track. Because in the UK, you're not prepared for heat. You had a 40-degree something day, didn't you? And it was like, how do you cope with that without aircon? Like, that's so dangerous. People die.
Yeah, do you know what actually? So that was 2022. And then in 2023, we had a day, our hottest day of the year was in September, which for us is, coming
Mm.
into autumn. And that same setup, had it been in July, where we would have had 2 hours more daylight, would have been close to coming up to 40 degrees. Like
Oh
it's,
my God.
so like it's not a once off. And actually there's an El Nino this year, which has a massive global impact as well. So we already know that we're on course for yet again another hottest year on record.
Do you know what? One of my posts, and this was just bizarre. So I have in Australia, we have something called a mechanical weather strip. I don't know if you have them in the UK, but basically 4 screws, you put it in and it's on a little hinge and it's at at the bottom of your door. It's to stop the rain and the heat coming in and the cold coming in. And it's got like it's metal, and then at the bottom of it's got like a little rubber strip. And then you put this little bit of rubber on the door jamb and screw that in. And then when you shut the door, it just flips down. So it's like, right? I posted that. I'd had that sitting in my drafts for like about 3 weeks. And I was like, oh, I've got nothing today. So I'll just post that. The Americans obviously have never seen it before and lost their minds over it. They lost their minds. That video has had 1.2 million views. It's so weird. And then they were like, where can I get that? Oh, I can't get it here at Lowe's. And I contacted the manufacturer, Raven, who are I think they're in South Australia. And I went, listen, just so you're aware. And they went, we know. We've been inundated with requests. We're now looking into US distribution. That just shows that people just
Yeah,
want
just
even
want
just those little
information.
things.
So I think we're gonna have to move on because we normally like to keep the first bit to about 20 minutes.
Oh,
Um,
that's
but
sorry if I've been ranting.
No, not at all. It's been great chatting to you, but we do have a little round called a Get to Know Me round, and
Oh,
Gemma's got a few questions that she put together.
oh dear. Okay.
Okay, so some of them are weather related, and then some of them are
Oh,
just really quite random.
oh.
The only weather related one really on it is what's your favorite season?
Hmm. I think autumn. Just because you can start, as my mum says, you can start wearing clothes then. Like it's just like you can start putting on nice things and more stuff. And I always know how to dress better in winter than I do in summer. And look at me, I'm wearing a black shirt right now in summer. It's like, ugh.
I think it can
Um,
depend on how you can cope with the heat. Like I'm Irish, as you can probably hear, and
yeah.
like my 22 degrees is about the max that I can actually physically cope with before everything really starts falling apart. So
Before your face and makeup start melting.
pretty
Yes.
much, yeah.
Yep, yep, yep. So yeah, I'd say autumn.
If you had to choose between the beach or the mountains, which would you choose?
Mountains. Haven't I live in Sydney. We've got some of the best beaches in the world. I haven't been to the beach for years, which so many people need. See, I knew you would be horrified by that, but I just have
No, I'm shocked.
absolutely
I'm shocked, but I
no
suppose I'm not
interest
shocked.
in it. No interest. I like going and looking at the ocean, but I'm just not interested in going in. No, I'm scared of sharks. The mountains. Yeah, definitely, 100%.
And when you say you're scared of sharks, that is a real thing over in Australia.
That's
Exactly.
legitimate.
It's a
Perhaps
legitimate
my
fear.
perhaps my parents shouldn't have taken me to see Jaws 3D as a very small child, and I blame them.
If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, can I have more than one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Um,
can. Yeah, yeah, of course.
uh, Initially I just thought invisibility because that would be cool, but I think flying actually. Flying would be cool. Yeah, flying. Ooh, maybe mind control, because then I could just like convince every politician in the world to actually just shift to renewables
Mm.
and make every fossil fuel executive realize they need to invest also in renewables. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be good.
This is one of our more random ones. If you
Mhm.
were a fruit or vegetable, what would you be?
You mean what would I look like, or what do I most relate to, or what is my favorite one?
No one's ever asked that question.
So we tend to go with which one do you most relate with?
Potato. It just
That's a
has
good shout.
so many options, and they're all good. But it's pretty, it's always willing to try different things and be exciting in all of them. So
I love
Beat
it.
a potato. Potatoes are just so good. They're
Best,
so
isn't
French
it?
versatile, so
fries,
yummy.
mashed
Yeah.
potato, like it's just so many things. But I just like how it pivots and it's versatile and they're all good. So I'm like, well, I may not be like that, but I admire the potato for that, and it's always
Oh,
delicious, and I will
potato
always opt
gratin.
for it, gravitate to a potato. I'll never say no.
It's a great
I
choice.
could never say no to potato. If it's there, I'm always going to say yes. If you could invite one person to dinner, it could be anybody at all from any historical time frame or even a fictional character, who would it be?
Maybe Mae West, just because she was so she wasn't a great looker, she was just this kind of, but she wrote her own stuff in a time where in the 1930s when women wouldn't necessarily have that kind of power. She was created this amazing career, and she just walked around like she was the best looking woman on the planet. And I'm like, yeah, power to you. Like she just gave zero, I was just like, yeah, yeah, maybe Mae West would be cool.
What would you
Yeah.
ask her?
I don't know. How did you do it? How did you deal with that misogyny? How did you
Mm.
deal how did you deal with the studio system? Yeah. And what do you think of today and what's going on? What's your
Yeah.
advice to ladies today? Um, yeah. And maybe Anne Lister, because I really liked Gentleman Jack. I reckon she'd be pretty cool. She'd have a few opinions, I
Yeah.
reckon.
It's an interesting point you pick up about what advice would she have for women today? Where there's just not as many female scientists around.
Right.
And yeah, it's something that myself and Gemma would love to see more of, just loads more girls coming through STEM,
Did you watch Lessons in
science,
Chemistry?
engineering. I read it actually. I read it.
Ah,
I loved it. And
the show is very good.
I have actually started watching it as well, but I did read it. It was an audiobook as well, so I really enjoyed the voice on it.
Did you
Um,
see that? There's a wonderful scene where they're walking down the corridor and she said, well, they won't let me do that because I'm a woman. What do you mean? But you're a scientist. And she said, well, name one scientist. And he goes, Marie Curie. And then it was like, name one more. And
yeah,
he couldn't. And he was like, yeah, right. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
But even
I've
he
actually got
didn't
it.
quite get it, he still didn't. He got the fact that she was brilliant, but and it just didn't make sense. It was like
Mm,
a train of thought he had never gone down.
mm, yeah.
So he
Yeah.
saw
Very sad.
saw her as a person, but also just failed to see that she was a woman and she's living a different life to him as a scientist,
Mm.
A
Well,
beautiful book.
did you see my screen grab of that troll
No.
comment?
Oh yeah, the one where you like take a I did, and actually I meant to forward it to Jem. It was the other night when I read it, but oh
There
yeah, there
are
was a
no female scientists, according to this troll. And I was like, oh, how I laughed. This
Hmm.
is the thing, is that trolls I find aren't terribly, like, there's no humor. And I'm like, if you're going to like troll someone, at least be funny about it. I've had one good trolling comment and it made me laugh and it was so funny. I thought I should put that on a t-shirt.
Our final question is, what is one thing that you wish everybody knew about decarbonisation?
But it's just so much cheaper. Once you do it all, it's so much cheaper, like shockingly cheaper. And I just don't think people realize that. We look at the outlay of these things, but when do you ever do things in your house and it actually gives you a return? Like it actually pays off itself, right? And then starts making money for you. People put in a new kitchen. No one goes, well, when will you get your money back from that? And it's like, no, that's when you put in solar, for example, it will pay for itself. And because energy prices have gone up so much, the payback is so much quicker. But yeah, just that it's actually, once you've done it, it's so much cheaper.
Yeah, it can feel like a big cost to lay out, but yeah, if you were buying a new kitchen or changing something big in your house, you wouldn't think, oh, when will I get my
Yeah.
money back? That's an interesting thought. I'm going to keep that
Mm,
one. I
mm.
like that. I think it's time to say goodbye to Sarah. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us for us tonight, for you in the morning as well.
Pleasure.
If anyone could see you, you're doing an acting face there. It's fantastic. Pleasure.
Pleasure. Pleasure. Pleasure, darling. Pleasure.
It's been absolutely great to chat to you tonight, Sarah. If you have been listening to this episode and you have loved it, we would love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review and share the podcast with lots of people. If you would like to follow us on Instagram, we are For the Love of Weather. On X, formerly Twitter, we are the number 4 Love of Weather. And Sarah, if people want to follow you on social media, we've mentioned your Instagram page a few more times, but if they want to follow you, where can they find you?
Just follow me on my Instagram. It's at electrify_this.
And we just hope that you leave this episode loving the weather, climate, and the world around us just a little bit more.
Thanks for listening.